Hello friends, welcome back to the Zekko Football channel. This is the recap, the show where we go through some of the major talking points from the most recent round of Premier League fixtures. Today we have Arsenal outclassing Manchester United, Nottingham Forest shocking Chelsea, and Brighton smashing Newcastle. If you are new to the channel, please make sure that you subscribe, you like the video, and turn on those notifications. And now, without further ado, let's recap. Let's begin with Arsenal against Manchester United. The game ended 3-1, and to be honest, I think Arsenal's performance reflected that result. It really was a good day out at the Emirates for the Gunners. Manchester United, I thought, played okay, but generally they were holding on in the game for a lot of periods, and Arsenal really did put them to the sword later on in the game. Arsenal didn't create ultimately clear-cut opportunities, but they did dominate possession. They shuffled the ball around, and as you can see from the attacking momentum bar, generally in the second half as well, Arsenal really started to control proceedings. They started to really dictate play, and Man United were holding on in certain occasions. They did have their own threats as well, it needs to be said. They scored a good goal from Rashford. Garnacho could have had a one goal late on, and then that big VAR call. Declan Rice scoring as well as Gabriel Jesus, and Arsenal come out comfy winners. If we have a look at the average positions, I was actually very impressed with the way Arsenal reverted back to the way that they originally played. I spoke about it in my match preview. If you haven't seen it, it was something to go and check out, because we do call a lot of decisions that Mikel Arteta made. Ben White coming back in at right back, the midfield pairing, or the back pairing of Saliba and Gabriel. Zinchenko coming into midfield next to Declan Rice. The one thing we didn't expect was Kai Havertz, and I think that was really because of Thomas Partey. Declan Rice in a post-match interview spoke about how he's starting to learn that 8 role where Kai Havertz plays, and I think that's to allow Partey to come back into midfield. But overall, I thought they were very, very good. Martinelli causing a lot of problems, as did Bukayo Saka. But interestingly, if you look at Bukayo Saka's average position, he's not down here. He normally is. He's not down here, and I think that's credit to Dalot. Dalot played a very, very good game, and it caused and forced Saka to recycle possession more often than not. He didn't get a lot of joy out of Diogo Dalot, and that is credit to the Manchester United fullback. If we have a look at Man United's average positions, they actually played quite a highish line. I thought generally they played okay. The midfield three did manage to fight that little bit better, and then Marcus Rashford being their own outlet. I was extremely disappointed with Anthony Martial, who ended up doing nothing in the game. I didn't think he offered anything from an attacking point of view. Defending wise, he didn't do anything. He didn't press. He failed to control the ball. His passing was off. He might as well have not been playing, and it really did feel like Manchester United were hampered a lot of the time that he was anywhere near the play. I thought Anthony and Rashford did quite a good job of tracking the runners back whenever they needed to, and overall I thought Rashford did a decent enough job with his finish. Anthony came back and helped out Aaron Wan-Bissaka to double up on Martinelli a lot of the time. So overall, I don't think Manchester United can be too disappointed. But they will be. When you lose in the 96th minute and then concede again in the 101st minute, it's always going to be difficult. But if we have a look at some of the statistics, it didn't seem as one-sided as the scoreline suggests. We had 1.18 expected goals to 0.64, yes. Possession was near enough about the same. Arsenal had 5 shots on target. Manchester United had 2. 10-17. You'd expect that with one side being at home. And overall, I think Arsenal just did enough. And in times, they did outclass Man United. But it wasn't a crazy performance, and it wasn't an underperformance from Man United in certain scenarios. If that Garnacho chance goes in and Man United keep it at 2-1, it's the perfect away performance. Unfortunately, their mentality and their backbone just was not there, and Arsenal managed to want it that little bit more. The game ended Arsenal 3, Manchester United 1. The Gunners outclassing the team from Manchester yet again. Up next, we have Brighton taking on Newcastle. They won this game by 3-1 as well. And really, Brighton was so impressive. They had a big hiccup against West Ham, didn't they? But they have bounced back with a treat of a performance. And Newcastle have some issues, don't they? They have some problems. Yes, they're playing against some very good opposition, but there are some concerning moments. But let's talk about Brighton first of all. Obviously, Evan Ferguson needs to be getting some credit here. A hat-trick in the game. He was absolutely fantastic. Some of the goals I think Newcastle could have done better in, but he needs to be there to take them, and he was. He was a fantastic performer, and when you think he's 18 years old, I'm just wondering how long it's going to be before Chelsea spend 150 million on him. Genuinely. Chelsea need a striker. Evan Ferguson is there, clearly performing. keeping Joao Pedro out of the squad. Or generally, I know they play them as a 2, but he could be keeping him out of the squad. Very impressive. Very impressive. Let me know in the comment section below how much Chelsea would pay for Evan Ferguson. Please do let me know. But if we have a look at some of the average positions for Brighton, I was extremely impressed. If you look at their lineup, you look at the way they play, 2 together, 2 wingers, they're just a joy to watch. And the way that Joao Pedro and Ferguson matched up and the way they created different runs to be able to allow for the space for Matoma and Solly March. Then you have the back 4 who was always there. The progression in passing from Billy Gilmour and Pascal Gross was just fantastic. De Zerbi is a top quality coach and he really has been able to get the better of Eddie Howe's Newcastle at this point, who have some problems. If we look out to this left hand side, we can see that there isn't a player there on the average positions. That's because Anthony Gordon has moved into the centre of the pitch, but also Matt Targett has failed to really come up the pitch, and that means that Newcastle's width just wasn't there. Alexander Isak ended up being quite isolated at times, and then you have Sandro Tonali, who was a driving force for this Newcastle side, but really isolated again in certain scenarios. Almiron not necessarily making the runs that he needs to, and Brighton dominated the ball on lots of occasions. Joe Linton failing to really use his physicality to really get a lot of possession for Newcastle, and overall it was a disappointing performance, which was caveated by a goal for Callum Wilson, but overall not good enough. If we have a look at some of the statistics, I just think that Brighton were just fantastic. 56% possession, 15 shots, 6 on target. Newcastle just weren't there. Yes, they have a similar expected goals, of course, but overall, I think that Brighton were worthy winners. And really, they should have done more. Arguably, they could have created more chances, and I was extremely impressed with the way that they managed to put Newcastle to the sword. Evan Ferguson obviously getting his goals, but Nick Pope, we have to talk about his mistake for the first goal. He should be at least claiming one of the chances from Billy Gilmour. I understand that it was a rocket of a shot, but he needs to be doing better and not palming it out into the box. And at the same time, his distribution was not good enough. The Newcastle back line looked somewhat haphazard. Dan Burn was not aggressive enough with certain scenarios. Bruno Guimaraes, Sandro Tonali and Joe Linton failing to really pressurise in certain situations when Brighton have the ball. And then you have a look at the attacking line. Like I said, Anthony Gordon went missing on certain occasions. Almiron failed to really drive through that wing. And then Alexander Isak became fairly isolated. There are problems in Newcastle, and I do think that there is a little bit more going under the scenes. They have played some very difficult opposition, and Brighton definitely are one of them. But it's food for thought. The game ended Brighton 3, Newcastle 1, and the Seagulls bounced back. Chelsea. Oh dear. 1-0 to Nottingham Forest. Away from home, a fantastic performance from them. A brilliant away performance where they get a goal, but really, what are you doing? Chelsea had a dominating amount of possession. I mean, look at the attacking momentum bar, but they failed to create anything. Let's go and have a look at the players themselves, and it lines them up here in a 3-4-3, but really, they transition in possession to a 4-3-3, which is absolutely fine. But positional-wise, I'm just really concerned about the way that Chelsea go about their business. Here's the actual front attacking line. This is the back 4, this is the midfield 3, and then you have the front 3. Now, I really like Ben Chilwell. I think he's a great player. He's brilliant at what he does. He's a good defender. He goes forwards. I like him. But for me, he's not a left winger. And he won't be a left winger. I don't really see it, if I'm honest. You have Raheem Sterling, yes, dangerous. Albeit he didn't do all too much, but he had a good game against Luton in the last match. It just doesn't fill me with confidence. And when you have players like Madueke, when you have players like the several amount of Chelsea players that they have. I mean, if we have a look at the bench, you have Cole Palmer, you have Mudryk, you have Madueke. If you're these players and you see Ben Chilwell starting ahead of you in left wing, you've got to be questioning that, don't you? Boss, Gaffer, why are you putting a left back in front of me in my position? You spent 100 mil on Mudryk, you spent 100 mil on several other players. Why are you playing a left back as a left winger? It just makes me question it. And then we have to talk about Moises Caicedo, who obviously moved to Chelsea for over £100 million, and he didn't really fill himself with glory, did he? He didn't really show himself in the greatest of lights. Giving the ball away for Nottingham Forest goal. Anthony Elanga taking his chance. Absolutely fantastic. It looked like the ball is going to take 20 years to roll into the net, but they did a brilliant job. And if we actually have a look at their average positions, yes, playing a very deep line, yes, of course, but really the threat is there. Awani is turning into a proper Premier League striker that teams really do have to fear. Danilo obviously going off later, but that gave chance to Anthony Elanga to be able to come on the pitch. I thought the Morgan Gibbs-White did quite well as well. Here is the midfield too, and then you have the surging Serge Aurier going forwards. Nottingham Forest had a game plan and they stuck to it, and I think they deserved the win, especially when you have a look at some of the stats, because this is criminal. 2.3 expected goals for Chelsea, yes, of course, yes, that's absolutely fine. 0.76 for Nottingham Forest, okay, but we know that games are not won on XG. 76% ball possession, 24%, okay, let's move on. 21 shots, that's a lot of shots. It's a lot of shots to 7, that's a lot. 2 on target. What am I looking at? Nottingham Forest had a ridiculous 3 times fewer shots than Chelsea, and they managed more shots on target. Now, if that's not an issue, I do not know what is. Chelsea need to go back to the drawing board and find out what on earth is going on. Nicholas Jackson, I think he is a real prospect. I've made a video actually about how I believe he will score 15 plus goals for Chelsea, and right now that is making me look rather silly. If you're interested, please do go check that out, because I do think he will eventually come good. But goodness gracious, really, there's a singular chance in that game that if you haven't seen it, please go check that out once you finish this video, of course. And really, he needs to do better. He needs to do better. I'm not a Chelsea fan, but really, it's starting to become a little bit one-dimensional, honestly, isn't it? However, I don't feel like I've given Nottingham Forest enough credit, but they were absolutely fantastic. They are really good. In our preliminary prediction video, we talk about Nottingham Forest and the way that they can transition. Anthony Elanga, Tawe Awoniyi, Morgan Gibbs-White, the pace, the power, the precision to be able to go forwards. And then you think about the way that they could play, the way that they could devastate teams, and that's exactly what they did to Chelsea. The pace, the power, and in the end, the finish from Anthony Elanga to allow it to be 1-0 to Nottingham Forest at the end. Chelsea woeful, Forest brilliant. And now let's go through some of the other scores from around the grounds. We'll start with Luton and West Ham. Luton losing by 2-1 at home, their first match in the Premier League at home, and it was a bit of a bitty affair, if we're honest. West Ham did start to do better with proceedings, but Luton did make their chances. I do have my concerns with Luton and the way they're going to try and score goals, because 1 shot on target out of 16 just is not good enough. You can't see that, but 16 shots, 1 shot on target. They had a higher XG than West Ham and a higher expected assist, but lower possession. Overall, I thought it was a decent effort, but really, should they have had a penalty for James Ward-Prowse's handball? It might have been harsh. David Moyes is starting to really do things with this West Ham side, and now they're starting to get players in. I was impressed with a couple of people in this side, and really, when you have a look at Edson Alvarez and James Ward-Prowse, it's a very good midfield. Paquetá going forwards as well. Benrahma and Bowen bringing that width with Antonio as well. I thought West Ham looked like a decent outfit. Luton need to give a little bit more, a little bit disappointing. Sheffield United against Everton. This was billed as a relegation scrap, and I do believe it is still one. Sheffield United doing well to equal out a 2-2 draw. Jordan Pickford with some absolutely fantastic saves. Everton really dominating proceedings in certain occasions, but Sheffield United really did give it to Everton, and that's why Pickford needed to be so good. Unfortunate with the own goal that he scored, is nothing that he can do about it, bouncing off the post and hitting the back of his head. Really can't. But Beto, we're starting to get somewhere. Everton might have a striker. They might have someone they can play through. James Garner out on this left-hand side is still not filling me with confidence. Danjuma getting a goal as well, I thought was very good. And then you have the midfield 2, or the midfield 3, I should say, of Sean Dyche's Everton doing pretty well. Ashley Young is amazing me how he keeps going. But really, Sheffield United, Cameron Archer really getting his goal, set up perfectly by Ollie McBurney, especially for that finish. It was just really good. It was a fun, entertaining game, and I think the spoils were shared pretty equally. It was 2-2. Watch out for these two in the relegation scrap. I'm telling you, honestly, it's going to be crazy. We move on to Brentford against Bournemouth. That also finished 2-2. Brentford really dominating proceedings, but Bournemouth really going at it. I've been very impressed with the way that Bournemouth have really made sure that they were difficult to beat, difficult to fight, high pressing, high energy sides, and it was really just a good game of football to watch. I thought Dominic Solanke did quite well. Kluivert is still yet to show himself, Billing was okay, but really, I like this Brentford front three. Mbuemo, Visa and Sharda. There was a moment where you got concerned for Bournemouth, but really they stuck in it, they hung in there, and Matthias Jensen, who is one of the more under-the-radar footballers, I think, coming in and getting a goal. I was very impressed with the way that he played. If we have a look at some of the statistics, you can see that Brentford's XG was 2.91 to Bournemouth's 2. It was a good game. If you haven't seen the highlights after this, please do go check them out because it was worth watching. 21 shots to 12, 7 shots on target to 5, a decent all-round affair. And that means we move on to Burnley against Tottenham. 7 goals in this game. I thought Burnley were going to start a little bit better. I'm going to be really honest with you guys. I thought they would really come into their own. 5 goals against Tottenham, though. They look very, very naive. If we have a look at some of the lineups, and especially the average positions, what is this? Really? No. And then you have the back four. They are far too wide. I understand they want to play expansive possession-based football. That's what they did in the Championship. But there are certain moments that you just need to realise and think about what you're doing. They were far too open. The line that they played was absolutely ridiculous, and Tottenham exploited it on numerous occasions. James Maddison was, again, fantastic. Just brilliant. Solomon, I thought, had a really good impact as well. I think he'll start to make that left wing position his own, especially if they put Son through the middle, who obviously got his 3 goals in this game. The game ended Tottenham Hotspur 5, Burnley 2, and really it was a good performance from Tottenham. Burnley did score 2 goals, however, we do need to mention that. I just would have expected a little bit more. Let's move on and talk about Manchester City against Fulham. 5-1 winners. It's getting boring at this point, really, isn't it? Erling Haaland had something stupid like 13 touches the entire game. 3 of them were for the hat-trick. I think it's 17 touches, actually. So let's think about that. 17 touches. 3 of them were for his hat-trick. Madness. I think he assisted as well. For Alvarez. Of course he did. Absolute madness. Man City are the only team with a 100% record, and I really can't fault Fulham. I don't think they did anything too wrong. They tried to play their game, but when you're playing against the juggernaut that is Man City, 5 shots on target, 5 goals, what are you meant to do? What are you meant to do, really? Fulham, I think, will have easier games, obviously, so I don't want to be too harsh on them. 5-1 can happen to anyone against Man City, and it just so happens to be against Fulham. City march on. And we can have a look at a thrilling game in the second half of this, because the first one was absolutely boring, was Crystal Palace 3, Wolverhampton Wanderers 2. I'm starting to get excited about Wolves again. They're starting to attack. They're starting to go forward. They have an emphasis. If you have a look at the attacking momentum bar, they actually really gave it to Crystal Palace in the first half. They just failed to create or really convert the chances that they had a lot of the time. Now, interestingly enough, Fabio Silva played a very integral role in the first half, and it was something that Crystal Palace couldn't really get to grips with. Yes, they line up in a 4-4-2, but actually out of possession they lined up as a 4-5-1. Fabio Silva went into midfield, Lamina dropped back, and he was next to Joao Gomez. Cunha obviously leading the line, with Pedro Neto and Pablo Sarabia helping out with that mid block. Now, Palace's quality did shine through, and I thought Edouard did a very good job for his first goal, but overall I thought Wolves were pretty impressive. This is that lineup. Here's the 4, here's the 2, but Fabio Silva drops that little bit deeper into a 3-man midfield, and I was very impressed tactically with the way that Wolves set up. Yes, they need to create a little bit more. Yes, they need to be a little bit more clinical, but there are positive signs there. There are shoots. There are green shoots, finally. 57% ball possession to 43%, so they dominated the ball, really. Yes, they had less shots, but they really do need to know how to convert their chances, and Crystal Palace, in the end, probably were deserving winners. But good signs for Wolves, good signs. It's not all doom and gloom for the side from Wolverhampton. Crystal Palace just had a little bit too much quality on the day. And that leaves us with Liverpool against Aston Villa. Liverpool, who dominated Aston Villa in this match, if you can see by the attacking momentum bar. Were they a little bit fortunate with a couple of their goals? Should one of them been chalked off for offside? Should one of them really have stood in another case? Was Darwin Núñez fairly unfortunate not to get on the score sheet, even though they do score? Yes, it was an own goal, perhaps a little bit fortunate. But overall, I was very impressed by the Liverpool. Yes, the back four was great. This is a very good midfield trio. I'm still not convinced about the likes of Alexis McAllister in this central defensive midfield role, but Mo Salah obviously doing fantastic again. Darwin Núñez earning his start after his brilliant performance against Newcastle. And then you have Luis Diaz, who is always doing well out on this left-hand side. Aston Villa did concern me a little bit, I will say. The high line that they play just is very, very dangerous. And against a team like Liverpool, who like to play passes over the top, who like to play progressive passes through midfield, I was baffled as to why they didn't drop a little bit deeper. Baffled, honestly. This is the midfield. And really, it was just... Yes, they started off with a back three. Carlos goes off. I understand that. But I just thought that line they were playing was... borderline footballing suicide against this Liverpool side, if I'm honest. 2.47 XG against 0.6. Villa didn't really get into the game. 3 shots on target to 4 shots on target, so Liverpool were very, very clinical. 64% possession. Really, it was all Liverpool, if I'm completely honest. Villa didn't really have a sniff. I thought Diaby and Watkins combined well on certain occasions, but it just wasn't enough, in my opinion. And finally, let's have a look at the Premier League table if we go and scroll up and talk about where teams are positioned with 4 games in. We do need to remember it's only 4 games in. But interestingly enough, what really stands out? Well, we have a look at the bottom 3. If I scroll down just a little bit, we can see that Everton, Luton and Burnley are in the bottom 3. I'm shocked about Burnley. Yes, I know they have had some difficult games, but I'm shocked about them. I thought they'd be a little bit further up. However, Tottenham and, of course, playing Man City on the first day is always going to be difficult. But in those 2 games, they've shipped a lot of goals. In those 4 matches, they've actually shipped 11 goals, as you can see from here. They've only scored 3, which is not good enough. It's not good enough. Luton are concerning me as well for the same reasons. Everton are still yet to get a win, as are Sheffield United and Bournemouth. Bournemouth, I thought, have had really good transfer business, but they need to be rocketing up the league as well due to the amount that they spent. Wolves are probably where you'd expect them to be. I was going into the season with Wolves quite downhearted, and I think they do need to up their game a little bit. But as I said, I was very impressed with the way that they played against Crystal Palace. You're starting to see some shoots there, so let's give them time. All of these teams need time, but we're just trying to draw some conclusions from only the 4 games played. Newcastle down in 14th after, let's be honest, a very, very difficult start. When you play the likes of Liverpool, but when you play the likes of Brighton, it's always going to be tough. But I think they would have expected a little bit more. I think they would have. I really do. Fulham in 13th. Chelsea and Manchester United sharing the bottom half, or the top of the bottom half of the table. And really, Man United not really up to the standards that I think fans would expect. Chelsea need to start to get going, and their run hasn't exactly been too difficult, if I'm completely honest. They won their game against Luton, fantastic. They drew the game against Liverpool, that was a decent draw. But losses to West Ham and then Nottingham Forest are things that I don't think Chelsea fans will start to accept in a little bit of time. They need to start scoring goals because they're really struggling to. Same amount as Manchester United, who are also failing to really get on the score sheet. If we have a look towards the top of the table, we can see that Brighton are in 6th. I mean, look at that. That's just fantastic. Playing great football, scoring a lot of goals. They are actually the top scorers of the league at the moment. More than Man City, more than Tottenham and everyone else. Arsenal climbing into 5th with 10 points. That's not bad at all. Liverpool as well with 10 and Tottenham, but Manchester City are the only team with a perfect 100% record. And now we wait for the international break to finish, for the Premier League to kick back over again. But my question to you are your thoughts on the Premier League table. How do you think your team has done? Who is your team? And tell me what you think about them. Let me know how you've judged the season after these 4 games. Try to be kind to your team if you're not too happy, because it is only 4 matches. But of course, with those 4 matches, gives you the right to talk about how amazing your team is doing after those 4 games, because that's how football works. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below on your side and how you've seen your side progress or fall in the last 4 games. Thank you ever so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something new, and I hope to see you in the next one. But until then, take care.